Yes, I'm ready.
Thank you. Over to you.
I'd like to start by saying good morning to our ministers, also say good morning to my fellow commissioners, and say good morning to the participants at large. I'm here to read a statement that was made by the South African youth in response to the NDCs as we have appointed. I'm the youth representative, and we felt like it was important for us to highlight these following points. I applaud the speakers that went before me. I agree with a lot of the points that you have made, and I'm really glad that we are all on the same page in terms of the NDCs. So we as the African Climate Alliance endorse the South African Youth Policy Committee in collaboration with the youth at SAIA's statement on the proposed updated nationally determined contribution. Further to our endorsement, we wish to express the following on behalf of all South African youth who will bear the brunt of the climate crisis. We as the youth of South Africa declare that our country and the world to know that we stand for—
Ayakha, is it possible to switch on your camera? Or is there a problem with connectivity? I'm sorry to cut you like that.
Yeah, there's no, I have a problem with connectivity and I'm trying to limit my bandwidth so you guys can hear my points clearly. Yes.
Understood. Thank you. Thank you.
No problem. So we as the youth of South Africa declare for our country that the world to know that we stand for a future defined by environmental, social, and economic justice. The climate crisis is a top priority that needs to be tackled. But in order for us to have a future worth living in, it must be addressed through an intersectional lens. Currently, climate change is still being seen as an environmental issue in South Africa and is dealt with as a peripheral. But climate change will undermine every single aspect of life and cannot be seen as mutually exclusive from how society or the economy works. A deep systematic change will be required to ensure that the most vulnerable people do not become shock absorbers for the impacts that will occur from climate change. In his statement on the 26th of April, President Ramaphosa said that the time for greater action is now. We have to reduce our emissions. We have to adapt and build resilience in our communities for our economy. The president also said that our nationally determined contribution, the NDC, which outlines our targets for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, is an important part of our response. And that it's only by working together to find solutions and by raising the level of our ambition that we can reduce the impact of climate change on our country. These words are important, but without real action, they are meaningless. We fail to see evidence of any significant raised ambition. The president stated that our new NDC proposes a significant reduction in emissions target ranges. And in consultations, it was stated that the NDC aligns with the preferred equity fair share approach. The truth is that the updated NDCs still fail to fall in line with limiting temperatures below 1.5 degrees, even in its best scenario. If the country only lives up to some of the lower target ranges proposed in the NDC, we can only look forward to catastrophic heating scenarios. We also fail to see the bold and decisive action that is needed from the government in order for us all to be able to work together. Our NDC and consultation is not progressive, inclusive, or accessible enough. Important documents that pertain to the NDC, such as the climate change bill, have not yet been finalized, and the people who are most affected by climate change are not being engaged in meaningful ways or are given the voice at the decision-making table. Even the NDC's youth consultation session that was held on the 29th of April was limited in how it gave youth the ability to contribute. We as the youth of South Africa thus call upon the president and all decision makers to make the NDCs and its consultative process more inclusive and accessible, and to commit to raising South Africa's climate ambition in a way that can practically bring about climate progression within the next 5 years. It will cost nothing to set more ambitious, lower target range in the NDC in order to facilitate a greater rate of change. Significantly raising the ambition of the NDCs will not only position South Africa as a leader of the just transition on the continent, but it will also open up a greater opportunities for international climate finance. At the Leaders Summit, Ramaphosa said that the developed economies have responsibility to support the developing economies to enable them to mitigate and adapt to climate change. But if South Africa does not act quickly and decisively, we risk losing this opportunity to access such as funding to implement our just and equitable transition. We understand that a transition cannot happen overnight, but the raging effects of COVID-19 pandemic have underscored just how urgently we need to mitigate, adapt, and build resilience for future crises. Whilst the pandemic has posed great difficulties, including a delay in the delivery of South Africa's NDCs, it has also led to a decrease in emissions and an impetus for the countries to embark on a green and just economic recovery. The pandemic has also demonstrated that when it's a matter of life and death, it is possible to manage previously unthinkable dramatic U-turns in public policy, and how we as the political will to say, there is a will to weigh. We implore the decision makers of today to act with similar urgency, to take decisive action now, rather than later regretting a lack of preparedness. The lack of leadership shown at this critical moment will not be forgotten by the youth, and we are the ones left to bear the consequences. Lastly, I'd like to highlight this point. Climate change is already impacting lives and livelihoods within South Africa. While most climate efforts are focused on either adaptation or mitigation, we highlight with urgency the need to define loss and damage as a third pillar of climate action. Accordingly, we urge the inclusion of efforts to be undertaken by investigative, describe and respond to ongoing and future loss and damage events within the updated NDC. We recognize that the need for policies, including the updated NDCs, to be simplified and readily accessible for ordinary citizens to easily understand and effectively engage in. Moreover, we urge the use of intentional and specific actionable language in communicating efforts that are needed to be undertaken. We highlight the public participatory process and legislative process of climate policies should be handled with more urgency, while allowing more meaningful and effective participation of all key stakeholders. Furthermore, these stakeholders must be informed to uptake their inputs as well as the outcomes of the participatory process. Recognizing the Enhanced Lima Work Program on Gender and its Gender Action Plan, we emphasize that gender-responsive climate action contributes to ambition and ensures that ensures that climate action is more effective. According to gender equality is a cross-cutting issue that needs to be mainstreamed through the NDCs and feature in the adaptation, mitigation, and climate finance components. We advocate for the collection of sector-specific gender-related data and analysis in vulnerability and adaptation monitoring process. Additionally, we support the meaningful participation of women in climate policy making and inclusive mechanisms for the implementation of monitoring the NDCs. These are the most important points that we as the youth thought needed to be highlighted in terms of the NDCs. Also, we have to be practical about this. If we want to move forward, we can't really leave the youth outside. And it doesn't matter how many times we can plaster the NDCs all over the world. If youth cannot understand the language of policy, we will not respond to the NDCs. So I greatly encourage that we use language that is accessible to people that are just ordinary South Africans, so that everyone can feel included in this decision-making process and make this committee more inclusive for everyone that is a key stakeholder. Thank you.